All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this evening's webinar on the Visualizing Knowledge community within the Carillon communities. We're really excited to be able to share a little bit more about this community, to share a little bit more about Carillon, and to answer some of your questions. For those who don't know me, my name is Ben Beltran. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of the Carillon communities. So our plan for tonight is for me to introduce Professor Oliver Geiken, who leads Visualizing Knowledge. He'll share a lot more about the course, and so you'll certainly learn more about that. And then our hope is to share a little bit more about the student experience as well. And what we'll do is reserve a good amount of time at the end of this webinar for you all to ask questions that we can hopefully answer for you. And so if you look at your Zoom toolbar, there should be a Q&A button that you can click. If at any point during the webinar you have a question, just go ahead and click that and type your question for us, and we'll receive that. And what we'll do is we'll save those all toward the end, and then we'll make sure that we get to them for you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Professor Geiken.
Thanks very much, Ben. So you see here a few of the pertinent details about myself, my pronouns, my educational pedigree, and the course that I teach, English 143, Visualizing Knowledge, Data, Images, Animation. And the big question of this course, and the big question is data beautiful? So from the big question, you can probably already see that this is not a straightforward or sort of disciplinarily aligned course about data visualization. We're not going to teach you, I'm not going to teach you how to run Tableau or to use other data visualization tools. Although if you are interested in that, and if you have a pre-existing facility with that kind of software, then that's great. And that's something that we can definitely incorporate into the class. But the main thing that we're doing in this class is looking at data visualization as a media mode from the perspective of media studies. So we'll think about it as something that has become an increasingly important form of visual experience in the latter half of the 20th and into the 21st century. Indeed, one of the sort of other sub-big questions of the course is, could it be that data visualization is the media form, the most important media form of the 21st century, in the way that cinema was the most important media form of the 20th century? So if I could get the first slide, please, I'll talk you through some of the sort of contours of the class. So this is a famous example of 19th century data visualization. Menard's as it's labeled, carte figurative of Napoleon's military campaign into disastrous military campaign into Russia. So part of what the class does is situate data visualization within media history, and one of the first things to establish is when it starts. And so for the purposes of this course, we're going to say that it starts more or less in the middle of the 19th century. There are important exceptions to that, but this is for the bulk of what we're talking about, the moment where this mode of making sense of the world starts to emerge. And this is a great early example of that. And we'll trace early on in the course both the history and some sort of kind of overarching concepts that we can apply to this field. And next image, Ben. Thank you. And this is an image that then responds, I think, more directly to this question of beauty, because in addition to establishing data visualization as a media form, we're going to specifically think about it from the perspective of the humanities. So think about it from the perspective, sometimes often, of aesthetics. So here's a visualization of satellites that are in low Earth orbit, but this was done by an artist. And so one of the dynamics of the class is to sort of think of this category of beauty in at least two ways. One category is to think about it as a question of appropriation. So what does it mean when tools of data analysis and data visualization, so for here, something that actually allows us to know where all of these low Earth orbit satellites are orbiting. The sort of the system that creates this image as a scientific tool is being looked at by an artist, and he's appreciating it for other qualities, color, pattern, abstraction. But at the same time, we're also going to think about to what extent science itself has aesthetic categories built into it. And so data visualization in that sense is something that's about understanding the world in a better way, in a different way. So I think if the next slide, this is an example. This is a contemporary example. The first half of the course is built up around big conceptual subheadings, and the first of it is data visualization as a method to track disease. So the epidemiological perspective, which of course is very much in our current consciousness, and one of the things that we do in this part of the class is to look at contemporary examples of data visualization around COVID. So here you see the Johns Hopkins tracker, which interestingly is now becoming a historical artifact. Hopkins is shutting it down because they're not getting enough data anymore to feed it. But we'll talk about how the sciences themselves are using data visualization to help make sense of crucial issues. So this is disease and epidemics. And then if we can get the next image, here's some examples of projects that students have worked on. So the first third of the class is sort of introduction to the history and theory of data visualization, disease and epidemiology, and then we also talk about the other kind of big categories where data visualization helps us understand the world. One of them is weather and climate, and then the third is also thinking about race and racism, how data visualization can help us access and understand those areas. A big part of the class is built around a three-part student project. And so here's an example of the kind of project that students have worked on in the past. This is a sensor that's going onto a satellite right here in Greenbelt, Maryland at NASA Goddard. And this was the JEDI mission. So if we could get the next image. JEDI was a laser scanning instrument that's, I think, on the ISS. And its task, the thing that it can do that nothing else in space can do right now, is to measure the density of vegetation canopy. So here's sort of an explaining image from the presentation that the students gave. And if we get the next image, here you can actually see what the data looks like, so that instead of just covering the surface, because this particular instrument is using LiDAR, it can penetrate and give you a sense of the density of the tree canopy from where it starts all the way down to the ground. So these students got to both analyze this project, and then in the second part, they got to talk to one of the investigators who was working on this project. So the group project is something that allows you to both intensively engage with a data visualization and also connect with the practitioners who are making it. And then one more image, I think. Oh no, that's it for my images. So that's a sampling of the kind of content that the class contains, and also the form in which it's delivered, so that the class is a mix of sort of short lecture, but mostly question and answer. And then there's also time, especially after the first third of the class, for students to work together on the group project in class. So happy to answer any questions that folks might have at this point.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that information. So folks who are on the webinar, feel free to click on that Q&A button, type your questions for us. While folks might be doing that, just a couple of sort of reminders. So this course would really be a big part of your Carillon experience, right? So for our Carillon students, you're really only required to take 2 courses, right? There's this 3 credit course, and it is associated with your assigned community. So for you all, that would be visualizing knowledge. And then there's only one other course. It's a 1 credit course, which is Idea 101. And so certainly this would be sort of a big part of your Carillon experience. And so we hope that this course sounds interesting. But yeah, if folks have questions, feel free to add those now. And we'll give a few moments for you all to do that. And while folks might be typing that, I'll actually just advance the slides to give a couple of important reminders as well. So we do have some UMD admitted student open houses. Hopefully you're able to attend one, particularly if you've never been to our campus before. It's a great way to see the campus and get acclimated to some of the resources we have. There are 3 more upcoming. 2 of them are in person, 1 is virtual. The dates are there. We do always want to remind folks about May 1st, because May 1st is a real big deadline. So that is the deadline for you to confirm your enrollment at UMD. And we hope that you choose to do that. We hope to see you in the fall. And then May 1st is also the deadline to submit your housing and dining agreement. So as a living learning program, our Carillon students our hope is that they'll live in one of our 2 residence halls, which is Easton Hall and Hagerstown Hall. When you submit the housing and dining agreement, you don't need to indicate those 2 residence halls. We'll coordinate with Resident Life to make sure that Carillon students get placed into one of those 2 halls. But go ahead and get that submitted sooner rather than later if you're able to. Yeah, and those are just some important dates to keep in mind. I'm not seeing any questions so far.
I'll just say that if there are students who are watching this asynchronously, in other words, you're watching the recording, feel free to email me if you do have questions prompted by anything I or Ben said. My email is available on the Carillon website, also just on the general university website. I'd be glad to hear from you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to that point, here's some of our contact info. There's the main Carillon email address. There's our phone number. If you call that number, you'll probably get me, and I'd love to talk to you. We also have social media as well. Particularly, I think our Instagram is a cool way to see sort of what we have to offer and what our students are up to. So definitely check that out as well. Yeah. So I want to thank folks. If there's no questions, I want to thank you for being here tonight. If you're watching this asynchronously, I want to thank you for taking the time to log on and watch this. And of course, like we said, if you do have questions, we know that you might have some, feel free to reach out, right? That's what we're here for. Yeah, and we hope to see many of you in the fall. Take care, everyone.